Welcome to the Norcross branch of the Gwinnett County Public Library. Thank you all for coming out this evening. I'm Merwin Chambers. I'm treasurer of the Friends of the Gwinnett County Public Library. Information about the Friends is available at the silent auction table. Books are for sale tonight thanks to Eagle Eye Bookshop. Eagle Eye donates a portion of their sales back to the library. I encourage you to purchase your books from them, and also to visit their store in Decatur. This program is being recorded tonight and can be seen on the library's YouTube author speaker playlist. The program will consist of a 60-minute panel discussion followed by a 15-minute Q&A period. Tonight's silent auction is sponsored by the Friends of the Gwinnett County Public Library. Proceeds of the auction are used to support library programs such as this one and future author events, as well as the Atlanta Reads online book club. Winners of the silent auction and the door prize will be announced at the end of this evening's presentation. Tonight's guests are the moderator, Michael Tafelski, senior attorney with Southern Poverty Law Center, Marlon Tillman, executive director of Gwinnett Parent Coalition to dismantle the school-to-prison pipeline, Gwinnett SToPP. Eve Ruiz, parent leader from Gwinnett SToPP. Dr. Joyce King, Benjamin E. Mays Endowed Chair and Professor of Educational Policy Studies of Georgia State, and she will be on the monitor. And Dr. Mark Warren, author and professor, Department of Public Policy and Public Affairs, McCormick Graduate School. Marlon, executive director of Gwinnett SToPP, will now introduce the panel.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming. This is just such a great moment for the organization, me personally, all of the parents in the room who have been organizing and advocating with us. Thank you and welcome. Just wanted to talk a little bit about Gwinnett SToPP for those who aren't familiar with us. Gwinnett SToPP is an organization that organizes parents, students, community members around just what the name says, dismantling the school-to-prison pipeline. And we do our work through policy advocacy, and we do the policy advocacy at the local, state, and national levels. We also do public education. So this doesn't technically count because we collected all your information. It's an organizing meeting now, right? But we do public education. We run a Parent Leadership Institute. And although it's named that, community members are welcome as well. We also run a Youth Leadership Institute and various classes around topics of education interest, such as the federal education laws, state education laws, school-to-prison pipeline, of course, and the student parent handbook, what it really didn't tell you. We've been operating now for, oh my gosh, 12, 13 years. And it came about because two parents who were already being advocates in the community and supporting those in the community having problems in the school system came to understand the gravity of the problem. More and more, we were hearing from parents around the discipline process. More and more, we were hearing about what tribunals, what that process looks like, how it is the lowest level of due process for a student, how students are assumed guilty until proven innocent, and you're rarely proved innocent. In the many years that we've operated, we've only had one student found not guilty twice in a tribunal. So that speaks to the lowest level of due process. And we got together, started talking more and more with the parents who were experiencing these problems and their students, And we held a community meeting and asked the community, is this a problem you want to work on? Do you see what's going on? And what we saw, and let me define what the school to prison pipeline is. So the school to prison pipeline is a national trend wherein children are funneled out of their regular education setting and into alternative education settings, the juvenile and criminal justice system. It primarily impacts males, students of color, students with disabilities, and students from low wealth backgrounds. And if you hit every one of those rungs, you're at the highest risk of being in the school to prison pipeline. And we saw this pipeline forming in Gwinnett with just that population. The majority of our disciplinary alternative schools are filled with students with disabilities and Black males. One. The other one is filled with Latinx males. So you can see the dynamics that we saw and were experiencing. So often students of color weren't part of those higher level learning opportunities. So often they were labeled as emotional behavior disorder. So often they were placed in settings where they were othered. And so we got together, held a community meeting, and the community said, let's go. We're going to work on this. And so Gwinnett SToPP was formed. We spent a year organizing, deciding how can we break this? How do we eat this elephant, right? A bite at a time. And we spent a whole year developing our mission, really bringing in others, and just having that whole hard conversations. And school staff was in the room with us. Teachers came, counselors came, social workers came. Every once in a while a principal. But we had a cross section of the community talking about how to solve this problem. Unfortunately, we have not worked ourselves out of business. But with all of you all's help, we could probably get there. So just to give you a little background. And now our panelist, I'll save Mark for last since he's going to be up here speaking next. I'll start at the end. Michael Tafelski is an attorney with the Southern Poverty Law Center, and we work in partnership on lots of things: tribunals, discipline, policy making, all the things that get some of us excited. And Michael has been quite a friend to families and students in this community. Next, we have Avelia Ruiz. Avelia is a graduate of our Parent Leadership Institute. See, this is advocacy in action. You have to get up here and talk about it too. And we have some other alumni in the room. I won't call y'all out yet. But start asking people, did you go to Parent Leadership? And some who went to Parent Leadership Light said it wasn't light. Okay, but it really was. And Avelia has been organizing and being a community activist and volunteer on many different fronts in our community. She has been a bridge for us to the Latinx community, and we really thank her for that and her service. And next we have, oh, Dr. King, how could I not get you? We have Dr. Joyce King, who I have had the honor of working with some of her doctoral students. Very nice experience. She always makes sure that the students bring the community into their work and that their work doesn't happen without the community. So I get lots of calls. We've had a dissertation written about our Parent Leadership Institute. So that was really, really awesome. And Dr. King is quite knowledgeable. She does cultural pedagogy, and she's just a wealth of knowledge. I wish she was in this space so that you could have the opportunity to chat with her. But she's at Georgia State University. Look her up and contact her. And then lastly, we have Mark Warren, the author of the book. Mark has been hanging out with an organization, a national organization, the National Dignity in Schools campaign. And he's been researching the organizations in there and talking to the members, and that's how this book came about. He's actually written several books about organizing and what it looks like for grassroots communities. So I'm going to stop here and let our illustrious guests come up and give a few words and tell us about the book. Thank you so much.
Good afternoon or good evening, everyone. Thanks so much for coming here tonight. I'm really honored to be here with Marlene and the parents with Gwinnett SToPP. I spent a bunch of time here 4 or 5 years ago, and there's a section of the book on the work that folks here in Gwinnett SToPP have been doing around the school-to-prison pipeline. And I'm also happy to be here with the Gwinnett County Public Libraries. Oops, I'm supposed to take this off. And to be here with the guests who have graciously taken some time to be part of this conversation about the book. So I am a professor, and I did this as a research study, but I'm also what I call a community engaged scholar. So I work in deep partnership with community organizations and parents and young people struggling for change in their schools and communities. And so the book is part of a larger collaboration with lots of different pieces to it. And a group of young people in Sacramento put together a spoken word piece and video to express their views about the book and about the school-to-prison pipeline. So we're going to show that it lasts for about 4 or 5 minutes to bring some other voices in the room, and I think to give you a sense of the larger movement that the book tries to represent.
They don't care if our babies thrive at school, long as they get by at school. Get by institutionalized racism and intergenerational oppression systems that keep prison pipelines thriving. Disguised as willful defiance, I'm trying to understand why urban schools have the highest rates of incarceration instead of culturally relevant curriculum that should be liberation. Suspensions from school feel like eternity. Strategically guide the black and brown kids out when we truly come to school to get free. Stifle academic and social emotional education. I'm just saying, could this be racially motivated? Outcomes being primarily black and brown youth become academically stagnated, leading to suspensions, expulsions, less school participation, stereotypes perpetuated. Is your school pedagogy, discipline, or human elevation? Discipline data from the Department of Education found that black girls are 5 times more likely than white girls to be suspended at least once from school. This data infuriating when black girls are 7 times more likely to receive multiple out-of-school suspensions. Where is the healing, motivation, and rebuilding? How do we stand in our confidence after it has been disciplined away? How do I come to school ready to learn when you are trying to strip my intelligence and make it seem like I am insane? Black girls are 3 times more likely to receive referrals to law enforcement when white girls are getting away with behaving the same way. And we already know what they are doing to black and brown boys. It's insane. Just check the data, it's been staying the same. I mean, steady increasing is definitely a shame. Do we want to teach black boys, or do we want to lead them away to trajectories that don't lead to school or higher education degrees? Schools act like they are paid to lead them to the police, when it's supposed to be a safe haven to keep youth off the streets. Expand opportunities, increase chances to succeed. Shouldn't school be focused on how to keep young people engaged and excited to be in their seats? Stop mistaking our pride for reasons for us to collide with suspensions, infractions, eventually leading to the police. We try to dismantle the school-to-prison pipeline. It's definitely time for us to get free. Who their students are and the environment they are living in. What students have to go through when they go home and live through before they can make it back to school again. Have you taken the time out to comprehend the life experiences of the children you are teaching and how your experience greatly differs from them. We have to remember school can empower or be a major hindrance. Is your school pushing towards prison or the most beautiful existence? The difference is we fighting for educational justice. Trust us, we won't stop until our babies get free. Educational liberation means we have to fight for what we believe. You can't suspend the truth out of our youth. You can't expel a generation that's meant to prevail. We demand an education where we can be more than our ancestors' wildest dreams. We want to go to school and truly be free.
Can somebody explain to me why? As soon as we enter the room, the teacher says bye-bye. We not getting paid enough. Why should I care for kids that don't care for self? That's just one last brother we have to worry about getting well. Can somebody explain to me why young sisters is being suspended disproportionately, hand-bound and kicked out of school for throwing a tantrums, sent out on Zoom for sending messages? Pipe down, little black girl, you're too domineering. Pushed out, harshly disciplined, over-criminalized, school not made for a black girl to shine. Can somebody explain to me why all my beautiful black and brown faces sitting in courtrooms over classrooms, juvenile offenders, minor underage, facing life rather than graduating? Something is wrong with this country's education. We losing our babies, perpetuating racism in a system that's not set up for us to win. If parents don't send their kids to school, we criminalize them. It's clear to me education is not for liberation, it's for disciplining. Can somebody explain to me why officer on campus arresting teens, placing minor in custody? It's a shame we live in a nation that doesn't invest in education. Can somebody explain to me why being black in school is a crime? My skin not willfully defiant, it's just a dirty trap to keep us trapped in the school to prison pipeline.
Let's give a round of applause. They're not here, but we'll give a little round of applause for the folks at Sacramento Area Youth Speaks. So I'm now going to talk for about 15 minutes, just try to give you a little bit of an overview of the book, and then our various panelists are going to engage around the issues that we're here to talk about tonight. Okay, so the name of the book is Willful Defiance. So according to the California Education Code, willful defiance is defined as disrupting school activities or otherwise willfully defying the authority of supervisors, teachers, administrators, school officials, or other personnel engaged in the performance of their duties. Many people don't know that public schools suspend hundreds of thousands of students, mostly black and brown students and those with disabilities, for behavior that is sometimes called willful defiance. Starting in the 1990s, state after state passed laws granting local school districts the authority to punish students for this kind of reason. It's part of what is called zero tolerance school discipline policies, where students can be suspended or expelled for very minor behavioral infractions like refusing to take your hat off or speaking back to a teacher. Mississippi schools suspend students for, quote, disruptive behavior. Louisiana for, quote, willful defiance. In South Carolina, it is called, quote, disturbing school, and for many years was caused not just for suspension, but also criminal penalty. So was acting in a, quote, acting in an obnoxious manner. In a widely publicized case in the state, Nia Kenny, who's pictured here, was charged with a criminal count of disrupting school when she used her cell phone to capture a police officer violently dragging another black girl from her desk and throwing her to the floor. This was a widely publicized case. It went viral in Spring Valley, South Carolina. It was one of the seminal moments that really sparked the National Police Free Schools movement. There you see Officer Fields throwing Shakara to the floor. Her crime was that she refused to hand in her cell phone to the teacher. Actually, she said she didn't have a cell phone on her. the teacher said, "I've had enough of you." I'm calling the school resource officer, which is another term similar to a police officer. He came in and said, "You have to give up your cell phone." She said, "I don't have one on me." He said, "I've had enough of you." Grabbed her, dragged her across onto the floor and across the floor. Nia Kenny filmed it, and the two girls were charged with a criminal charge of, quote, disrupting school. The officer was never charged with anything. And it did spark this national campaign whose first action was to try to get, successfully to get those charges dropped. So it called the book Willful Defiance, in part to highlight what is really going on in so many of our schools in regards particularly to black and brown students, particularly males, but not only, as we see, also black and brown girls and those with disabilities. But we were trying to flip the script on it. And we're saying, well, if this system is really designed to punish and discipline and criminalize children, then people maybe should willfully defy that system. But when people try to stand up on their own and do it, they are often subject to retribution, sometimes arrest themselves, both students and parents who challenge the system. And so the book is really about a collective movement about how parents and young people in places like Gwinnett, but across the country, have tried to come together and willfully defy a system together and build a movement. The book has a number of themes which we can get more to in the conversation, but we're really trying to understand how a group of small, fairly under-resourced community organizing groups like Gwinnett SToPP have been able to really mount a campaign against a zero-tolerance school discipline policy and really defeat zero tolerance, at least as public discourse, and start to change discipline policies and actually start to remove police from schools. And two of the main themes of the book is the vital importance of people who are most impacted by injustice being at the center of that movement, that is students and parents of color, and also how local organizing groups banded together to form a national movement. And a national movement exemplified by organizations like the Dignity in Schools campaign that Marlene referred to, which is a coalition of 120 mainly organizing groups across the country, how those local organizing groups came together to build a national movement, but one that wasn't so much focused in Washington, but rather accumulated resources that were then devolved back down to local organizing groups so that they could be stronger and win their campaigns locally. I'm not going to talk too much about this. I mentioned the community engaged research that I did, and I'm happy to talk a little bit about my efforts, particularly as a white male college professor, to try to form deep partnerships with organizing groups almost entirely populated by black and brown parents, young people, and organizers, and the various kinds of things that we tried to do, not just to produce a book or spoken word videos, but also toolkits of resources that we could put together to offer and strengthen organizing campaigns. That's me in a picture in a high school in Chicago with a group called Voice that where a coalition of young people, students who weren't even old enough to vote, led a statewide campaign to change school discipline policy statewide in Illinois, a successful campaign called SB 100. There's a chapter of the book about that. Get the school discipline pipeline, well, it would take a while to explain it all. But in a sort of specific sense, it refers to an interlocking system of institutions from the school to the prison that send hundreds of thousands of our young people every year on a pipeline from school into prison. It refers specifically to these zero-tolerance discipline policies that suspend and expel students for things like willful defiance. They're now out of school, on the street, more subject to engagement with the police. For whatever reasons or whatever also perceptions on the part of the police, and end up in the prison system. And it also refers to policing practices where we have a police stationed in our schools. And so most people may not be aware that when I went to high school in the 1970s, there were only about 100 police officers entirely across the country in US schools, only 100. By the early 2000s, there were 16,000 police officers stationed in schools, and the numbers have only gone up. And I think what is often not appreciated, I think we have to understand that the school-to-prison pipeline system arose in the 1990s as part of what Michelle Alexander has called the New Jim Crow, a system of mass incarceration, particularly of African American men, but more broadly black and brown men and women. And so it's part of that system of mass incarceration where we ended up with 6 million people incarcerated by the early 2000s in this country, the highest percentage of any country. I keep knocking this over. There, highest percentage of any country. What we don't often appreciate is that in many ways mass incarceration starts in school. That for many young people, their first encounter with police is actually in school. And they are, every year, 250,000 students are referred to law enforcement in school. Many schools actually, in Chicago, for example, for many years had police stations located in schools, and young people, children, were being arrested and booked and sent to prison directly from school. It's part of an intergenerational system. The mass incarceration of parents then impacted the students. Not many people know that fully 1/4 of black children in this country, by the time they are age 14, fully 1/4 will have a parent who was in prison at one time. And the consequences are really devastating. If you are a black man in this country without a high school degree, your chances of ending up in prison at some point in your life are 2/3. So 2/3 of all black men in this country without a high school degree will end up in prison currently at some point in their life. And of course, if you are convicted of a felony, in some states you lose the right to vote, you lose the right to public housing and other kinds of public benefits. In any case, the book is mainly not about how the school-to-prison pipeline works, but I think we have to understand the deep-seated nature of this system to appreciate why we need a mass social justice movement and educational justice movement to combat it. And that's the premise of the book. Oops. So, we missed a few. Okay, so in any case, just to give you a little sketch, the book starts in Holmes County in the Mississippi Delta. And I went there to try to find what are the earliest origins of the school-to-prison pipeline movement. And in the mid-1990s, African-American organizers like Helen Johnson that you see here, or Ellen Reddy that we were talking about earlier on the panel, started to see young people out in the streets during the day, during school time, started asking, well, what's going on? Why aren't you in school? And they started hearing stories after stories of young people who were being suspended or pushed out of school for various minor infractions. In one famous case, a group of students were throwing popcorn at each other on a bus. The popcorn hit the back of the white school bus driver, and she drove the bus straight to a police station, and 7 African-American boys were arrested and charged with criminal assault for hitting the bus driver in the back of the head with a piece of popcorn. And that was one of the first and earliest campaigns around the school-to-prison pipeline. They actually named it, at that time, they called it the schoolhouse to jailhouse track. And it's very important to understand this because the whole analysis, the recognition of the existence of the school-to-prison pipeline, the analysis of it, as well as a campaign to start to combat it, started in places like Holmes County. It wasn't started by professors or researchers and scholars like myself. It wasn't named by the traditional civil rights advocacy community in Washington. It was named and launched by, in this case, African-American parents and community members in Holmes County, Mississippi. We wouldn't be talking about the school-to-prison pipeline today without the organizing efforts of people who had the direct lived experience and then also developed their whole analysis of this system. So I start there and then try to chart the development of both local organizing and the national movement and how the two fed each other. Because the theme of the book is that local organizing cannot build the power, parents and young people locally cannot build the power to defeat this kind of system only in the local area. They need to build a national movement to do that, but one that is dedicated to strengthening local organizing. And I tried to chart how that happened, traveling across the country and identifying path-breaking campaigns, like one in South Los Angeles. They won the first campaign to change school district policies district-wide in Los Angeles. That victory was then lifted up and spread across the country to inspire other people to organize. They formed things like the Dignity in Schools campaign, and then went back, and there's other campaigns and victories, and this sort of dynamic I tried to chart. I mean, looking back on it, if people are familiar with the term zero tolerance, that is, that students should be suspended for any minor infraction. We should have a zero tolerance to anything. That actually, in 2008, that was the law of the land. It was federal policy. It was a policy in virtually every state in the country, in every district. Both national teachers' unions supported zero tolerance. All the national education associations supported zero tolerance. When parents and young people said, we are against zero tolerance, they were told, you are crazy. You will never, this is necessary, and you will never change this system. Within 6 years, the federal government issued national guidelines and a statement warning against zero tolerance, called for an end to the school-to-prison pipeline, and at least in rhetoric, zero tolerance is defeated. In addition, campaigns were run across the country that actually changed school discipline policies to end those kinds of practices. I'm going to go, well, let me just for a second. So this is a very complex movement. It's intergenerational, it's intersectional. It was a struggle, and I try to talk about, like, how do you build a movement that can identify the particular issues and lift up the particular struggles of black girls within the school-to-prison pipeline without diminishing the assault that's happening on black boys in this system. And I also talk about the rise of the police-free schools movement. So in 2020, on the wake of the mass protests against police racism and violence, we started to see calls for removing or defunding police from schools. And in fact, 130 school districts across the country passed resolutions to either significantly defund or remove police from schools. What people don't know is that the seeds of that movement have been planted for at least 10 years. I talked about the Nia Kenny case, but in 2012, the Black Organizing Project in Oakland declared the goal of entirely removing police from schools within 10 years. They were told, you are crazy, we're not getting, police are established in schools, they're going nowhere. Lo and behold, in 10 years, police were removed from Oakland public schools. But it was really the places where organizing groups had laid the foundation for these changes, and then they were ready to kind of seize the momentum of the mass protests to really push through these kinds of changes. So it's important to understand a lot of the base building kinds of work, some of the things that Marlene was talking about, holding parent leadership academy, youth leadership academies, doing political education, doing research. All these kinds of things are important to really changing the policies that are in place. So in any case, I think we can think about some of the big impacts that this movement has made and changing national discourse that I mentioned. You know, there have been significant reductions in exclusionary discipline, by which I mean suspensions and expulsions, as a result of these organizing campaigns, particularly in places where organizing and advocacy has been strong. In Los Angeles, where I mentioned the work of a parent organizing group, in 2012, they were able to pass the school Climate Bill of Rights, and it took away the ability of the district to suspend students for willful defiance. And suspensions and expulsions went down drastically. There were 75,000 days lost to suspension in 2008. By 2018, that number was down to 5,600. So these are really big declines in the number of students who are being pushed out of school. And we've also seen the beginnings to defund the police. A lot of challenges remain. Even though the numbers have gone down, the racial disparities remain, by which I mean black children are still 3 times, there may be less being expelled or suspended, but they're still 3 times as likely to be suspended as white students. The persistence of police and policing practices, new forms of surveillance, and I think this is something we can talk more about if we want. How do you really create authentic alternatives that really transform the culture and practice of schooling? And I want to end on that note. You know, I talked about school discipline policies, I talk about policing practices, but really, you know, school push out and the school to prison pipeline is a result of a confluence of many factors, including, you know, underfunding of schools, culturally irrelevant curriculum, racism and poverty in communities, so that children are not really prepared to go to school and to do well in school. And so in many ways, I think what we hope, or what I hope and the movement hopes, is that the conversation or the movement to end the school-to-prison pipeline really opens up a much larger conversation of what are really the kinds of transformations that we really need to have if we're going to create a public education system that is safe and welcoming to all students. Beyond that, humane, and even beyond that, a system that is really helping our young people develop themselves as free and full human beings. So thank you, and I'm looking forward to hearing from our other panelists and their thoughts about this issue.
I'm short, so I don't need it? Okay, all right, cool. Okay, so my name is Evelia Ruiz, and I'm the mother of 4 Gwinnett County, I guess, alumni, right? And also, my sister passed away in between my nephews being in high school, so I had to take care of them too, so I had 6. Because 4 wasn't enough. So, and throughout their school years, there was a lot of things that they went through. You know, 2 of them lost their moms, so their life just kind of, changed a lot. They struggled a lot to find their place in school because, they didn't have a mom. So, and everyone did love them and supported them. And but there were many times where they were faced with things that I wasn't their mom, so I couldn't help them, right? So there was a moment when one of my nephews, there was a Pledge of Allegiance, and my sister had just passed away. They had just come back to school. And they took 3 weeks off from school after she passed away. And so when he came back, there was a Pledge of Allegiance, and he was sitting down. And he just wasn't feeling like being in school. It just, but we were trying to put him back in school because we didn't want him at home. He was in high school, so it was really hard. So he decided to stay sitting, and while he was sitting down, the teacher approached him and told him, "Why don't you go back to your country? Since you have no respect for the flag." And well, my nephew, like any boy, he's not he wasn't feeling well or anything. He just looked at her, got up, and left. By the way, my nephew so my family comes from the South, and the South of Mexico. So there's a lot of Afro-American families there as well, Afro-Mexican. And so he doesn't look Mexican. He doesn't look, he looks like a mixture. Sort of like most people would say that he was Puerto Rican because he's light complexed, but he's got thick lips. I mean, he's a beautiful boy with curly hair. So my nephew just looked at her, got up, and left. He just walked out. And I guess the principal was aware of what happened. And I'm a very knowledgeable person, so I always advocated for my nephews and my sons and my daughter. And I always stood up for them, and I always told them, whenever something was wrong, don't speak back. Try to hold on to whatever's going on. Take deep breaths. And if they want to go through your things, you tell them, you can't touch my stuff. You have to call my mom. You have to call my aunt. You can't. I'm a minor, so you can't touch my things, So I really, really took the time to always educate them about that. Respect people, but also ask for them to respect you back. And then whenever they try to take advantage of the fact that they're authority, you remind them that you're a minor. Always remind them you're a minor. And when you say that, they'll remember who your mom is, right? Even though I wasn't their mom, they knew I was always there. They both had IEPs, so I was there twice a year, and whenever anything happened or anything that I wasn't okay with, I would go and speak up about it. I was the kind of parent that would call for an IEP meeting when there was there was absolutely, according to the teachers, no need for it. So anyways, they knew me. So he got out, he left the school. So they called me on the phone and they told me, we want to send the resource teacher to follow, the resource officer to follow him, but we're not sure what to do, Mr. Ruiz, we need you to come here. And I said, you know what, it's okay, I got him. So I drove to the school and I saw him walking, so I parked in the middle, find a space on the road, parked, got out, and I said, hey, what are you doing? He's like, I'm walking away, I don't want to be in this place. And I said, why? He says, they don't like me there. They don't want me. And why would I be there if they think I'm from a foreigner place? And as a person that has experienced racism, it hurt. Because I taught my sister to teach my nephews to speak English when they were little. I pushed them to read. I did everything you're supposed to do so they can be prepared when they go to school. So they don't have to be what some people have called the Mexican problem, right? The kids who don't know how to speak English. So you can treat an adult however you want. But when you use those words on a child, it hurts way more. It just does. It just hurts like, you came here, you did everything as best as you could. You taught the kids to speak English. They're fluent. They're doing everything right. Something was wrong in their life. And one day they decide not to stand up for the Pledge of Allegiance. They're not insulting the flag. They're not burning the flag. It's just, they're feeling sad, Whatever is going on in their home is not the teacher's fault, and I get it. I'm not saying all teachers are like that either. But what I'm saying is, we have to be aware. If we are teaching, if we are leaders, if we are the ones who want to be followed, who want to be looked up to, then we have to behave the right way. I came back, I got him, I took him to school. The principal stated, oh, well, what's going on? I sat with her, I said, okay, I can leave him here, I can take him home, it's your choice. And I said, and the resource officer has nothing to do with this. He was insulted, and instead of him reacting in the way, aggressiveness or any type of way, he decided to walk away from the situation, which is way better than anything else for me, knowing him. He's a boy, he's aggressive, he's going through all these things. And I said to him, the principal said we can exchange, we can move him his schedule, we can change the teacher, we can, she just wanted to make me happy. She just wanted to make me happy. And it wasn't me, I wasn't hurting, I was hurting for him, which is way worse. So I'm looking at him and I tell him, so what do you want to do? And he says, can I just go home today? And I said, okay. And I said, so tomorrow we come in and we change your schedule. And he says, no, I'm gonna stay in that class. And that for me was mind-blowing. Because as an adult, I don't think I could have come back to a class with a person that decided because she was having a bad day, she could do that to me. And I was just impressed by him, by his resiliency, by the way he maneuvered the situation. Like I said, as an adult, I don't think I could have done it. I think I would have blown off. I think I would have probably been on the news, with the resource teacher trying to hurt me, having a tantrum or something, because it just didn't click for me. And he finished the school year, and he did great in that class. And it was one of his favorite subjects. So, and he said she was a good teacher, you know? So it was just the person she was at that moment. And it just, to me, it was too much. And you can hear situations like this. This is one I had. But as a person that has been in my community, I've heard so many stories. But I believe that, you know, they're those people's stories, and they should be the ones who tell those stories. But there are so many stories out there. So many kids have just been, you know, removed from a safe place and put somewhere else. And I just don't see how you clean something by just moving someone and leaving that space empty. You know, you remove a child, you're removing the essence of that child. You are telling that child that he's no longer relevant. He doesn't need to be there. He doesn't deserve to be there. So you break their spirit. I used to attend the Gift Center. One of my children ended up there. And I used to drive my child to and from the Gift Center. And I used to see parents there, their first day, you know? And the parents, Latino parents, they would be crying. You know, my child is in jail now. This is not jail. This is just a little, you know, it's a little bit, a challenging moment. They're gonna go back. But these parents are quitting their jobs because they have to drive these kids to and from school. And they can't work because they have to be there on time to pick them up, to drop them off. They have to have, you know, uniforms for these children. The way the gift centers are set up, it's a hinder to the parents. It's a hinder to the community, because you're making that parent quit that job, and now he or she has to figure out a way to drive to and from that child to school, and a lot of the times it's not next door. You know, I chose to drive my child to a school that I felt was smaller, a smaller gift center, because the gift center that was closest to us was really overcrowded. So I asked if I could drive her somewhere else, and I was given that opportunity, and I'm grateful to that principal. And my daughter thrived there. However, I don't think that she should have been placed there, because she wasn't broken. There was nothing wrong with her. She made one mistake, and that was it. But we do that to our kids more often than not. The other problem I have is also the way we discipline them. You know, if you're late to school more than a certain amount of times, you get suspended for 1 day. How does that work? Who is that helping? The fact that your child is suspended from school? Nobody that gets anything from that. I mean, the school loses money, you know, if we look at it that way. And your kid is at home doing nothing. So the one time my child got suspended, I said, nope, he's going to school. You're gonna put him in the NTI room, and he's gonna do stuff, because I don't want him home. He's gonna be home playing Xbox, doing nothing. The principal looked at me like I was crazy. And I said, he's not going home. He's staying here. And they did put him in the NTI room, and my child hated me for that, but I'm okay with it. You know, you have to, if you're gonna punish, fit the crime. Don't punish to send that kid home, because I have to go to work. What is he gonna be up to? And if he gets in trouble, I'm not gonna be there. And there's a lot of things that the school system forgets. These are working parents, most of us. Working parents means we need those kids in school. We need them to educate themselves so they can support themselves and grow up to be professionals, so they can grow our communities. Thank you.
We will now have a few words from Dr. King.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay? Yes. Okay, great. Well, congratulations to Mark for the wonderful book, and to Marlon and Gwinnett SToPP for years of work. And I have to acknowledge Marlon's contributions to the students at Georgia State. I can call you the godmother of community engaged research. And you mentioned that one of our students did the study. I feel like I was there early on, the study of the Parent Leadership Institute. And I need to tell you that that former student was just tenured as an associate professor at her university. You know who I'm talking about. So thank you again. And appreciate that I've known Mark for a while. And I want to encourage everyone to look broadly at the work that Mark has done. Willful Defiance is a wonderful example of the scholarship that we need, but the impetus to really lift up the voices that are left out and to create research processes that allow people to work together and learn from each other locally and nationally is really, really important. I have had 2 occasions already to refer Willful Defiance to people. I got a call from a friend in California whose grandson is in Atlanta, and she said, "Oh, can you help me find a school for my grandson? He's having problems." And so I mentioned Willful Defiance, and she wrote me back and she said, "His parents need this book." So these problems that are endemic to what is wrong and what is wrong with education, it's as this out, it's not just local, and it's the power of organized communities to work together to put a stop, like Gwinnett SToPP, to put a stop to practices that are inhumane and the brutalization of children and the violence that is occurring in classrooms and in policies. So I have gotten into the book, and you know, it's heartbreaking. You cry a little bit and then you cheer because that power to resist and defy willfully is demonstrated. And I'd just like to close with a personal testimony. I've been in education in one way or the other for 50 years. When I was in the seat in my elementary school, the kindergarten teacher came to get me out of my 6th grade classroom and to take me back to the kindergarten, because one of my younger was in kindergarten. The teacher was in kindergarten. The teacher was by locking him in the bathroom. And he was hysterical, and they couldn't get him out of the bathroom. So they came to the bathroom. So they came to me. And the reason he was hysterical, he was saying, "Don't lock me up like they locked up my dad." So this is a long journey towards liberation. Thankfully, my cousin is a successful businessman today, but so many are not. And I was the child in my family that my grandmother took with her to visit relatives in prison. So by the time I was 12 in California, I had been visiting a relative in San Quentin, Atascadero. I could list the prisons that I had been in as a child. And so part of my commitment and understanding that we go through the education system and we take a risk. We can either be quote unquote successful and be assimilated and be identified with what the system is doing, whether we're educators or students, or we can understand that something is wrong and we need to work for transformation, justice, and liberation. And this event tonight is reminding us of the reality that people all over the country and really around the world, we are not alone. We are with others. We often don't know about those others. And Willful Defiance is a tool that we can use to learn more about what possibilities exist and learn the lessons of transformation and liberation. An inspirational quote has meant a lot to me over the years. And this is Gene Debs, the socialist actor. And right now we're in a political in Georgia that compels me, said at the beginning, I'm speaking as not representing Georgia State because we are under post-McCarthy-like conditions. So this effort to be organized, and learn with each other is not an easy thing to do under these conditions. So my quote that I'd like to share with you that has inspired me for many years, Eugene Debs said, "While there is a lower class, I am in it. While there is a criminal element, I am of it. While there is a soul, in, I am not free." So thank you all for helping us on this journey toward freedom and liberation.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Mike Tafelski. I'm a senior supervising attorney at the Southern Poverty Law Center. I help lead our children's rights work at the SPLC. I've been a lawyer for 15 years now and have dedicated the majority of my career to working with students in education cases. So I've represented hundreds, if not more, students in Georgia and Alabama who have faced exclusionary discipline, who have been arrested in school. I'm joined by my colleague Claire Sherburne, who's another senior attorney on our team and who does a lot of work here in Gwinnett County. And SPLC is a civil rights organization, but we see ourselves as community movement lawyers. And as part of that work, we use what we call an integrated advocacy model. So we see litigation as one piece of our work. And so we can file lawsuits, we can defend students, but ultimately if we want to see the liberation that Dr. King has spoken about, I think we need to have a variety of strategies that we use. And so we use policy advocacy, legislative advocacy, we do know your rights events, public education, try to inform communities. But in my experience representing students, I've always felt like the most critical piece of the work that we're doing is the organizing component, because so many families that I've represented feel isolated and alone in this experience when they aren't. And I'm so grateful to Ms. Ruiz for sharing her experience, because that sharing is what empowers other families and other folks in the community to know they aren't alone in these experiences. And in Gwinnett County, there are thousands of students every school year who are being suspended and expelled and referred to law enforcement. So many students in Gwinnett County that they have created a courthouse on campus because they process so many students through the tribunal process. So the first time I represented a student in Gwinnett, I walked into this building that's attached to the Gibbs Center, which is the alternative school in Gwinnett County. You gotta buzz the thing, you're like walking into a courthouse, there's a metal detector. And I was stunned because I've represented students all across the state and never seen anything like this before. And you walk in and there are courtrooms, room A, room B, room C, and they're filled with students. And Gwinnett County has full-time hearing officer judges who hear these cases continuously. And very, very few, probably less than 2%, if that, have access to an attorney or an advocate. In fact, they've created rules and policies that if you aren't an attorney, you're someone like Ms. Tillman who wants to go and advocate for a student, they won't let you. They won't let you come into those rooms and advocate. So those kids who don't have a caregiver who can be with them, who may not have a parent who can leave work to be there, they're sitting in there by themselves, watching a prosecution by a school system that's intent is to remove them from schools and criminalize them. And do you know where that building is located here in Gwinnett County? right across the street from the county correctional complex. It's the visual, literal school-to-prison pipeline here in Gwinnett County. And that is why when Claire and I got going and we were hired by the SPLC to build out the children's rights work, we, thanks to all the work that Marlene has done for the last decade plus, we knew that we had to start in Gwinnett County. And we knew we had to come here and we needed to stand with students and parents and community members and make sure that we put an end to this. And it's going to require all of us in this room and across this county to do it, because the forces against us are pretty strong. And I think that where we can come together, though, is through the organizing, through lifting up stories when we can share them, sharing about what these processes look like. So when a student is suspended or expelled for more than 10 days, Georgia law requires them to go to a tribunal. And that's where the system then starts to eat kids up. In Georgia, as Dr. Warren mentioned, we're one of the few remaining states that not only, many states you can discipline a kid for willful defiance or school disruption, but Georgia is one of the few remaining states that it's a criminal statute that criminalizes disruption of school, and it was codified and passed in response to student activists during the civil rights movement who were protesting in schools. And so now it's being used to weaponize against students of color today, to criminalize them when they engage in, basic adolescent or, minor conduct in school. And so, so I think that there's a lot of work that we need to do. Claire and I, this year, kids are going through a really difficult time. They're coming back to school for the first time after COVID, and the number of suspensions and expulsions has always been high, but this year is nothing like I've ever seen before. Our phones won't stop ringing, and we've probably seen it all, from the most minor infractions that children are being suspended and expelled and arrested for. And so I'm very inspired to be here. It's always good to be with this group and know that there's a lot of work to do. And I know that I was maybe running short on time, so maybe we should open it up for Q&A for the audience, or do you want? Okay. I had a few questions, and then maybe we can open it up to any questions from the audience. So for Dr. Warren, can you talk a little bit about, you mentioned that there were 130 school districts that had passed police-free schools resolutions across the country. To my knowledge, there are none in the South and none in Georgia. And I'm curious if you're aware of any in the South, to hear kind of what has been successful for them, but also to hear about maybe what you've identified as successes in other parts of the country that could be adopted here in the South, and maybe what's holding us back from doing that.
Right. It's a good question. I don't know of any in the South, which isn't to say that there aren't any, but I don't know of any. And most of the better known and more successful cases have not been in the South. So, and I think part of the reason for that is there is a stronger infrastructure for organizing in other parts of the country and less so in the South. So there's greater funding, so I think part of what seems to be successful in a lot of the organizing cases is kind of deep organizing and sustained organizing with people who are most impacted. So parents and young people being involved, driving it forward, speaking, sharing their testimonies with each other and in public events and with legislatures. That combined with building a broader base of power by aligning with groups like SPLC, other kinds of legal advocacy groups, and having some of the funding to support that. I think that, part of that, so some of that I think is more of a struggle in parts of the South. I think there's also, a larger political context of whether there are openings and more, less organized opponents, if you will, or a political culture that might be more open to change. Although what I we should also recognize, as I tried to say, that in the early 2000s, this was pretty deeply embedded across the country. And it wasn't a partisan issue. It wasn't a Republican or Democratic issue. In many of our big cities, which had really entrenched school-to-prison pipeline systems, were run by, so-called liberal Democrats. So, and the federal policies that promoted mass incarceration and the school-to-prison pipeline were initiated both by Republican and Democratic administrations. So, Clinton's crime bill obviously played a big role, but there's a whole charting of these things through. So, and the other thing I would say, I know I'm not directly answering your question because I don't know that we can translate some of the strategies directly to the South. But I did start with the story of what happened in Mississippi because even though I think the victories were tougher and haven't been as great in the South, the organizing that's happened in the South has been incredibly important to building a national movement that then led to victories in other parts of the country. So it's kind of ironic that I would say that the organizing of the South is part of the explanation for why Oakland has removed police from schools. So it's a complicated interaction there. And I think we have the legacy, the extreme, racial divisions and legacy of slavery that's in the South, which again is not like it wasn't in the North either, but I think the depth of it is there too. So I don't know, I think it's a big question, and maybe others have a thought about it too, but I also think that we should, there's a quote in the book from Joyce Parker, who was one of the leaders of the Mississippi campaign, and she said, in Mississippi, we're always last in everything. We have, the worst this, the worst that, the lowest graduation rates, the lowest literacy rates. But in the movement to end the school-to-prison pipeline, we were first. And I think there's something there about like the depth of that experience in Mississippi, and not just that people organized there, but they didn't do it in isolation. That other people from around the country started coming to Mississippi to see what they were doing and learning from them. And then were able to replicate it in their own conditions in places that were maybe a little bit more hospitable to actually being successful. Yeah.
Thank you.
Can I ask or make a comment about that?
Yes, please.
That question. Okay. My daughter is a high school principal in a city, and when the Oakland campaign to remove police from the schools was heating up, I suggested that the people involved in the Oakland campaign should actually talk to some of the school principals who might say, well, what are we going to do without police in the schools? And so I would like us to maybe think about what not replaces, but what are the needs from the perspectives of teachers, administrators, and then what is needed for the benefit of the school community when we remove the police from the schools. We're experiencing right now more violence, however you want to analyze it, more violence, as the attorney said, kids coming back and things are really challenging. So guns, resource officers with guns, what is our vision of what ought to be taking place without police in the schools?
Can I hand that to you, Marlene, to talk a little bit about what suggestions you would have for?
You can't stop me. I think the biggest thing is understanding, like, I'm not even surprised that children came back this way. The adults came back this way, right? Yes. But back before the pandemic, we didn't build the culture and climate that we wanted in the school that was going to support coming back from something that devastating. And so now we're screaming, no, we can't do it now because the kids they're just going off. But where do we start? At what point do we start? So restorative practices. It's not something to do to a kid, it's something to do with. It's not just with a child, It's with the other adults in the building. It's how you build a culture and a community of care. And that's something that we spend too little time on. Relationship is huge. In Gwinnett County, we must reduce class size. Class sizes are running, ask your students, over 30 and over children in a room. And we're coming back from a pandemic that was really raging. We still have one, but it's not raging. But you're cramming all those bodies who come back with all sorts of challenges. We know that lots of our students lost people they love and they care about and who's close to them. Just like with Avelia's nephew, who's caring about what that looks like? And no, schools can't provide everything, but they can begin to build a foundation where children feel emotionally safe. They're not emotionally safe with someone with a taser, and I'm gonna run down what Gwinnett police have. Gwinnett school police, who are sworn police officers. A gun that's issued to them, and as the former chief of police said to us, I don't know any officer worth his salt that's not carrying his personal weapon too. So now we have 2 guns. We have a taser, and we have a nightstick, and the officers in a bulletproof vest. Please tell me how you're mentoring me with that. Please tell me how, as a sworn law enforcement officer, that you can counsel me, which requires a special skill set that I haven't had. We have counselors in the building, but they're not mental health professionals. And we don't connect over to the larger resources in the community because the school can't provide everything. But I'm just gonna say, in building that culture of care, and implementing things like restorative practices in partnership with mental health professionals. Because again, we can't do it all in the school, but if you hold the door closed and holler, we don't have any help, you know, nobody comes in, get off the door. People will come in. So we have to build that community of care. We have to put things in place where children learn how to do conflict resolution, where children learn how to manage and understand their own feelings. And how do we do that? We do that in how we treat each other. Do you beat your children every time they do something? Why are we beating the kids in school? And I don't mean that literally, although in Georgia, corporal punishment is legal, by the way. Just in Gwinnett schools, it's not done.
Let me just add, I don't want to, a couple things. I think that it's true that a lot of principals and teachers feel like what are the alternatives or that they need police. But actually, you know, the research that's been done shows that there's actually no evidence that police make students safer in school. There's no research evidence at all that says that. And instead, you know, what most of the research shows is that police are called in mostly, are brought in mostly for to address minor behavioral infractions, like the case of Shakara in Spring Valley, who, you know, the crime that required police was that she wouldn't give up a cell phone to a teacher that she said she didn't have. Now, how is that a crime that a police officer is necessary to address? And also, research shows that it really, schools that have police, you know, the attention towards teaching and learning is being diverted. There's a lot of negative consequences, and there's also all this evidence that police activity is racially discriminatory, that black students who do the same things compared to white students are referred to law enforcement and engage with police officers when white students are not. There's also, for example, here are some interesting statistics. 1.7 million students attend schools in this country who have police officers but no counselors. 3 million students attend schools with police officers but no nurses. 10 million students attend schools with police officers but no social workers. So, you know, I think it's a question, where are we investing our resources? But I also agree that, you know, the answer is not just to remove police. It is really about transforming, you know, moving towards restorative practices, transforming the culture and relationships that occur at schools.
And I would just add, there are
ended the use of exclusionary discipline in schools, and they've created positive cultures and climates that create a community of safety for students, and the behavior referrals drop immensely and student achievement increases immensely. And so I think there are models that we can be looking to. And in my experience, law enforcement officers often aren't trained in schools with de-escalation techniques. Cross-examine a police officer, doesn't even know what it is, doesn't know what restorative practices are, don't know what trauma-informed practices are. They are there to police the schools, to police the children, not to mentor them, not to be a counselor, not to, be what we sometimes see in these nice Facebook videos that I think that is not their role, and they, in my experience, don't see themselves in that role. And they oftentimes aren't trained with how to respond to students with disabilities, or even know if a student has a disability when they get called. And by being there, they become a crutch for oftentimes educators who just assume, whether it's the policy, the written policy, or just the practice, that if we have a disruption in the classroom, if something is going on, we immediately call the officer to respond. And I think that ends up escalating situations oftentimes that can lead to outcomes more worse than they would have been. So yeah, well, I don't know if that's a good place to open it up, or if you would.
Can I give
yes.
my
Oh,
2
please.
cents?
Yes.
I
Yes. I'm sorry.
actually attended Gwinnett Tech for a criminal justice technology bachelor's degree, and because my mentality was I should become a police officer in the schools and be the change, right? Be the change that I want to see. And I did the whole training. I was done. I was very excited, but I needed one more class, and I was like, oh my God. And it was an option, and I just didn't want to do that class, but it was the last one, so I had to do it. And it was training, gun training. And it's like a game, like a gun connected to a TV game kind of thing. And I was doing that training, and I was with the partner. It was always a partner. And most of my classmates were veterans, which was really cool because it was an awesome experience to be with people who had served for freedom, right? And so I'm there, and the one time that I was with one of them, it was a group of kids. The scenario was a group of kids, and they were hanging out in the back. They were smoking. And so we had to come in because they had called us because there was a disrupted, they were being loud. So we're coming in, the kids are on the TV, and my partner draws his gun, and the kids just start running, and I'm just frozen, I'm just dumbfounded. And my teacher, who's a police ex police officer, looks at me, and he was actually a sheriff, and he looks at me, he says, "Why are you not drawing your gun? Your teammate could have gotten killed. What are you doing?" And I'm like, "I don't see any guns. How do you know they don't have any guns?" He paused the video, and I said, "Well, you paused the video, and I don't see anybody. I mean, they're running. That's what kids do when they're doing something bad. They run. They don't come back and shoot at you." And he looks at me. He's like, "You don't know what's gonna happen." And he keeps playing the video, but he's already mad at me because I already failed that training and for the day. And we finished the video, and no, the kids didn't do anything. They just ran away. And so we go back out, and then we have a second one. And this one is a homeless guy, and it's the same thing. I don't draw my gun because I'm also previous life social worker, so I'm not gonna kill anybody. So he says that same thing to me. And after we finished the training, out of the 7 videos that we did, I probably drew my gun one time, and I just kind of put my hand there. I didn't do anything else. And he said, "You could have shot yourself." And I'm like, "Oh my God. So what do I need to do?" And so that's when it kind of clicked for me that, what kind of training is that? And it's a school. It's a school that they're teaching you how to do this. And he's saying to us that for police officers, it's even it's like 13 weeks, something like that. It's even faster. They learn everything fast and in a fast pace. And I'm thinking, man, if I had to go through training through a police academy, they're gonna kill me. I'm gonna die in every one of the trainings because I'm never gonna draw my gun fast enough. And I'm just like, that's it. I'm like, okay, I need to find something else to do because this is not it.
Training that Avelia is talking about. In Gwinnett County Schools, you cannot be hired as a school resource officer unless you have 7 years on the street. The only training that is done to transition you from the street to the school building is they tell you that you can't, there's a higher duty of tasing the children. That's the training. Think about that. And you think about that the officers that were in training with Avelia were being taught, draw your gun every time. You are a police officer. You are not a counselor. You are not a mentor. You are not a teacher. You're teaching something, but not what we need our kids to learn. I'm sorry, I'll stop. No. Go ahead. Questions? No, I was going to say.
Okay. Do you want me to open it up? Or? Yeah, sure. Okay. Do we have some questions from the audience? Jonathan? Yeah.
Hi. Thank you all so much for all your perspectives. My name is Jonathan Perez Campos. I am a tired Latino educator. I work in Cross Keys High School in the Cobb County Schools, not as a school teacher, because I cannot bring myself to work for the county to push standardized testing and all that. So I teach in that school and in other schools doing programs for Latino and undocumented students. And we've, like schools across Georgia, across the country, we've seen escalating gun violence, aggression from students, and with that, escalating policing in our schools, escalating metal detector usage in our schools that is further traumatizing our children. And I think that one big issue that I kind of have to navigate is it's oftentimes a lot of our own parents in the community. I work in an over 95% Latino high school. With a lot of parents who, we're all, just like the teachers and the students who have had active gun threats in the community, right, that have shut down the school. We all want to be safe. We all deserve to be safe. We all deserve to be in schools where children feel welcome, where teachers feel okay to just teach and do their jobs and do good. But that's just not been the case. And parents don't feel safe sending their kids to school. And they don't even feel safe in their neighborhoods where there's gun violence and gun deaths often. And so the big issue that I have a question about, I'm wondering what your thoughts might be, is how do we talk to parents who are very carceral themselves, who are very big on oh, that kid committed this crime, throw that kid in jail, When it's the parents themselves who, a lot of them are undocumented and they fear the police, yet there's that dissonance of, okay, but we still need the police to throw other people's children in jail if their kids are criminals. I'm wondering how you kind of navigate that conversation, what your solutions might be to trying to get cops out of schools and trying to address safety in the community and in schools, while also dealing with the fact that it's parents who are often supportive of these carceral and pro-police solutions that are also hurting our children.
So, we ran a survey, and we ran it through Nextdoor and online and all sorts of places. And we asked people, kick police out of schools, yeah, yay, nay, or something else. And a lot of folks had the or something else. And the something else was, no, the police do things to Black and brown students that shouldn't be happening. They over-police us, da-da-da-da-da, but you can't get them out. Maybe you can send them over here. Maybe they shouldn't be involved in the discipline. Maybe. And I approach that conversation by just being very honest with people and showing them information and data, and ask them in what situation have you felt safe with an officer, and in what situation has he helped you? And do you walk around with your own personal police officer? Because we say it's for safety. You want one in the school, the officer can't be all over the building unless they can do fission. So what are they really providing? And just really having that back and forth dialogue and unpacking where that safety point is and what they're looking for in the safety. So that goes back to what Dr. King was saying and talking to the people in the building to find out what is that safety point, what makes them feel safe, and how do we move from there? What does that look like to change it to something that's less carceral, not carceral would be my thing, not carceral. But even to get them down that path, you have to start somewhere, you have to hold the conversation. And it's going to be tough. Got something? No?
I can just add that, I think if we oftentimes are having to advise our clients' parents, on understanding how the system operates and how the system harms their children. And also sometimes our clients' parents do more harm for their kids in the legal sense by saying, go sign that statement, participate in, the investigation, and then all of that information gets used to criminalize their child. I think that it's showing folks who may only know, right, a system with police, that there are alternatives available and that those alternatives can be successful, because we know that through models that we've seen, but also I think that once you become reliant on the police as that crutch, I think then it becomes all you think that is available, and police simply aren't effective. If they were working, if this was working, right, our numbers would be going down. But for decades now, our numbers are going up. So, I think it's time that we need to reimagine what the resources that we invest in police could look like if they were placed elsewhere. And Marlon, what is it, $10 million police budget at the Gwinnett County schools? So
10.4 million.
what could we do with $10 million in the Gwinnett County schools differently? What could we do with half of that differently? I think that there's a lot of progress to be made, and we have a program through SPLC. Folks may be familiar with a department that we have formerly called Teaching Tolerance, but now called Learning for Justice. We've renamed it. And we actually have an educator fund through that network that provides up to $25,000 grants to teachers with technical assistance to help implement alternatives to exclusionary discipline. And we are hopeful that Gwinnett County schools will take advantage of our next application process in the fall and apply for one of these grants and see about piloting some new projects. And we're really willing to not just be adversarial lawyers with the district, but to think about how we can support the district in making changes that we know will be successful if they're willing to do it. So.
Could I add something? I think the other side of what is being said, organizing is also building community. So not just when there is a crisis, but as a process of creating that climate for transformation. And the Parent Leadership Institute is a great example. So connecting parents to have conversations, to share experiences, to recognize alternatives, and to look at their own parenting and their own belief system. I mean, that's part of the education process that's inherent in organizing. So programs like reading together, movie nights, something that brings parents into relationship so that there is a problem solving collectively. This parent has that attitude and that's a problem, but how to create a space for parent relationship and have in relationship and have access that we're talking about.
Yes.
Yes, I'm a community organizer here in Gwinnett and throughout different parts of DeKalb and other places. but I see that there is contradiction in a way that, you know, we kind of celebrate Dr. King on King's Day, right? But we do not really use the principle of nonviolence, right? Okay, and that principle of nonviolence is not the children just wearing what Dr. King and the speech, but it's really is about making these things into the curriculum and making our schools into community courts. So when a kid does something wrong, it's an opportunity for the school community to learn about that mistake, right? And have peer leaders to be those judges, right, in these courts, right? So I think that model of restorative justice through peers, right? And layering this, so therefore we're really embodying that principle of nonviolence. And just like what Dr. King said about the parents, Gwinnett doesn't really welcome their parents, right? So what happens is when the parent is not wanted, there is no way, right? Because I'm the monster in my house, right? My children fear me more than principal, right? Okay? Because at the end of the day, I am the ruler of the house. They came to this world because of me. Those guys can never replace me, and I will never allow them to replace me. So when a parent loses their authority, right? What happens is, and you're not welcome in the school, you have the buzz to come into the school, you're not creating a community that it can build itself. You're dismantling the resources of the community, right? And the school needs to be the heart of the community, right? So what are the solutions for us using the school as our organizing space, right? Because that is our public money. That is what I'm paying taxes for. That is what the space that we need to own as a community, as parents, because nobody can teach my children without me, right? I'm the first parent. You know, I'm the first teacher in their life. So I think we have to look into, we are the solution to this, right? And if we really want to be able to take the school resources out, we need to replace it with parents, right? Parents that are walking, fathers that are walking, mentoring. So unless we are able to be the answer to ourselves, we will never put our hands on that $10 million. No?
Yes, please.
My experience, and I'm trying to make it short, demand supply. What I'm seeing with the school system, you keep children engaged from formative years and the crucial adolescent year, you don't have a lot of problems. But we have a demand and supply where the prison system, the financial gains of that sector feeds into education lack. So we're not educating our children. We're pruning our children from elementary level to prison. Because even when you have a child graduated with no skills, with no true education, no knowledge, the frustration, especially the black boy, the black male, and now I'm reading about the girls, because I have two boys, so I didn't understand the plight of the girl. Being Jamaican, I didn't have that problem growing up, in the school. But I see a system being fed, the prison system, and people strategically put in place, laws put in place to feed into that system and to override. You come in one system, pre-COVID, it was this story, and then post-COVID or during COVID, every year now I'm seeing different stories. But all the stories lead to laws and practices that lead to breaking the child's spirit, breaking the child's self-esteem, to create that prison pipeline. Absolutely. And parents, we don't have a choice, because I create a foundation at home that is not translated in the school. So I have a child that goes to school with an IQ of 147, thinking he has a 70 IQ, and then performs that way. And continues, and is now trained to be a failure year after. And no matter, I go to board meeting, so this problem is, we have to understand, we have to do some writing off in society. You can't repair broken people that don't have the foundation. The Bible says, grow it that way so it don't depart. We have a lot of broken kids, humans, that we can't fix completely, but we need to get a system in place to start from the bottom, where they can't break our kids because they're so firm. So the community, the school, we have to get together and stop this capitalism where it's feeding into the prison system and ruining communities, you go to McDonald's, you go to Bloomingdale, anywhere you go, top class, the service is disgusting because people are not properly equipped. We don't have solid citizens in the world, and I'm a proud American, and I'm ashamed that this country is worse than a third world. I go to a classroom in Jamaica with 50 kids in the classroom, and we function well because we are engaged, and we have a system that lets us know we can do better. That's the problem, and I don't know how to fix it. I go everywhere. That's the problem. We're feeding our kids into the prison system, and we're sending our kids to school every day, and we're losing them.
All right, thank you. Dr. Warren, you want to take the last word on that? Yeah.
Sure. I think a lot of really good points have been made tonight, and I think I would just, end a little bit by saying, I think we often focus, we think about restorative justice, or we think about, how do we, create circles or deal with student misbehavior. And I think that we really need to do a mind shift, that it's really not really about student misbehavior. Actually, what the vast majority of students are doing is just normal teenage behavior. There may be there are obviously some exceptional cases, but that's not mainly what's happening. So in my view, restorative justice isn't really for the students. The restorative practices really need to be for the adults who have set up a system that are criminalizing and punishing and disciplining our young people. And that, I think, is a shift that we have to make. And as I was trying to say earlier in the talk, there's a confluence of factors, and I think it could seem overwhelming, but I think what we have to do is look at this and this movement more as an entry point to asking, well, why aren't our schools welcoming to parents? Why aren't they rooted in the communities in which children are growing up? Why don't they have a curriculum and a teaching practice that really reflects the experiences and the history and culture of our young people? Why do we have an education system that really is functioning to reproduce our class and racial order in this country? And if we're going to change that, then I think we have to look for solutions not just in our educational establishment, but in the families and the communities that have really sustained and helped students and our young people survive and even thrive through 400 years of white supremacy. So those, I think, are some of the places we have to start looking in the movement, I think, and the work that people are doing in the movement is an embryonic place that is growing, I think, and creating some of the seeds that we really have to look to as educators and education researchers and professionals.
At this point, I think we're going to have to cut it off tonight. Okay. We could go on all night long. We'd have more announcements in the morning. Nothing we can do about those. I would like to thank you all for coming out tonight. I would like to thank Dr. King, Michael, Eve, Dr. Warren, Marlon. I'd like to thank you for the passion you brought tonight to this discussion and the passion that you have for our children. Thank you for being here. Dr. Warren will be available. One other thing, thank you to the library staff for arranging and putting on these events. And also to our videographers. And as I said at the beginning, you will be able to see this in a couple of weeks. Dr. Warren will be signing the books. Please make the signing line single file through the center following Ms. Denise here. Watch out for the cameras, please. We don't want anybody getting hurt. There are also a lot of cables lying around. Please be careful. And in a couple of minutes, I will announce the winner of the door prize. And if anybody wants to take another chance on the silent auction, I will be announcing the silent auction winners. We do take cash, check, or credit cards. Thank you once again for coming out tonight. Appreciate your passion and appreciate the questions and what you've added to tonight's discussion. Thank you.